The morning was quiet at the small regional airport in California, the kind of place where the smell of jet fuel mixes with the fresh scent of dew on the grass. The sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. It was a Tuesday, and the terminal was mostly empty, save for a few sleepy staff members. This was exactly how Keanu Reeves liked it. He wasn't interested in the flashing lights of Hollywood or the noise of movie sets today. He was here for one reason: he loved to fly. Keanu walked across the tarmac with a steady, relaxed pace. He wasn't dressed like a movie star. There were no designer suits, no entourage of managers, and no heavy security guards blocking his path. He wore a simple, worn-out leather jacket over a t-shirt, a pair of comfortable jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. In one hand, he rolled a small, battered suitcase. In the other, he carried a helmet. To anyone who might have glanced out the window, he looked just like any other pilot getting ready for a routine trip. He headed straight for a private hangar at the edge of the airfield. Inside sat his pride and joy, a rugged, reliable aircraft that he loved to fly himself. It wasn't a massive luxury jet that required a crew of 10 to operate. It was a practical machine, something that felt like an extension of his own body when he was in the air. Keanu enjoyed the simplicity of it. Up there, above the clouds, he wasn't a famous actor. He was just a man in control of a machine, free from the expectations of the world. Keanu placed his bag near the side of the plane and began his pre-flight check. He moved with deliberate, practiced motions. He checked the fuel levels, inspected the tires, and ran his hands along the wings to make sure everything was secure. He was thorough and focused. Even though he was one of the most recognizable faces on the planet, here, nobody was bothering him for an autograph or a selfie. He had even booked the flight under a different name just to ensure he could have this peace and quiet. His plan was simple: fly from California to New York. He had some personal matters to attend to and some family to visit. It was going to be a long flight, but he was looking forward to the solitude. As he was finishing his checks, wiping a bit of grease from his hands with a rag, he noticed a man standing near the main terminal building. The man was pacing back and forth, looking at his watch, then looking at the sky, and then checking his phone again. He looked distressed. Keanu paused for a moment, watching him. He could see the tension in the man's shoulders from all the way across the tarmac. The stranger was well dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Keanu's suitcase, but he looked completely defeated. Keanu considered minding his own business. He wanted to get in the air and get on his way. But something about the man's body language made him hesitate. It looked like the man was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Being someone who has faced his own share of heavy times, Keanu knew that look. He decided to walk over and see if everything was all right. As Keanu got closer, the man didn't even notice him. He was too busy arguing with someone on the phone. Keanu could hear snippets of the conversation. "I have to be there. I don't care about the cost, it's her wedding." The man's voice was cracking. He hung up the phone and let out a long, deep sigh, kicking a small rock on the ground in frustration. "Excuse me," Keanu said softly, not wanting to startle him. "Is everything okay?" The man looked up, surprised. He took in Keanu's appearance: the helmet, the leather jacket, the casual clothes. He clearly didn't recognize the famous actor standing in front of him. He just saw a pilot. "No, not really," the man said, rubbing his temples. "I'm sorry to bother you. It's just, my private charter flight was just cancelled." Apparently, there's a mechanical issue with the engine, and they can't fix it today. Keanu nodded sympathetically. That sounds stressful. It is, the man continued, his eyes wide with worry. I have to get to the East Coast by tomorrow night. It's my daughter's wedding. I'm walking her down the aisle. I can't miss it. He laughed bitterly, looking at the empty sky. I've tried every commercial airline, but everything is booked solid or delayed because of the weather coming in. I feel like I'm stuck in a nightmare. Keanu looked at his own plane, sitting quietly on the runway, then back at the frantic father. He checked his watch. He had planned to leave right now. He had his own schedule to keep. But he also knew exactly what it felt like to be desperate, to feel like the walls were closing in. He knew that sometimes, a small act of kindness could change a person's entire day. I'm actually heading to New York myself, Keanu said, his voice calm and low-key. I'm flying my own plane. It's not a big jet, but it gets us there. The stranger's eyes widened. Really, you're flying to New York now? Yeah, just about to take off, Keanu replied, shifting his weight. He didn't make a big deal out of it. I've got an empty seat in the cockpit. If you don't mind riding in a smaller plane, you're welcome to come along. I can get you there in time for the wedding. The man stood there, stunned. He looked at Keanu, trying to process if this was real. He was a wealthy businessman, used to paying thousands of dollars for last-minute travel, and here was a stranger in a leather jacket offering him a ride for free. I don't know what to say, the man stammered. Are you sure I can pay you? I can pay for the fuel, for the landing fees, anything you want. Keanu shook his head and smiled, a genuine, humble smile that reached his eyes. You don't need to pay me anything. Just tell me about your daughter on the way. That's payment enough. The relief washed over the man's face instantly. It was like watching a heavy burden being lifted. He reached out and shook Keanu's hand vigorously. Thank you, he said, his voice trembling slightly. Seriously. You have no idea how much this means to me. I think I have an idea, Keanu said simply. Come on, let's get your bag. They walked over to the plane together. The stranger, whose name was still unknown to Keanu, grabbed his expensive leather bag from the curb. Keanu helped him stow it into the small cargo compartment of the aircraft. There was an easy silence between them as they prepared for the flight. The stranger was still in shock, but his panic had turned into a quiet gratitude. He watched Keanu climb into the pilot's seat and start going through the start-up checklist. He saw how focused and serious Keanu was, checking the dials and flipping switches with expert precision. As the stranger buckled himself into the co-pilot seat, he looked over at the man who was saving his day. He still had no idea he was sitting next to one of the biggest movie stars in the world. To him, Keanu was just a decent human being, a guy who saw someone in trouble and decided to help. The engine roared to life, drowning out the noise of the morning. The vibrations of the plane hummed through the floorboards. Keanu put on his headset and adjusted his microphone. He looked over at his passenger and gave a thumbs up. You ready? Ready, the man replied, a smile finally breaking through his worry. Keanu taxied the plane to the runway, the wheels rumbling over the asphalt. He lined the nose of the plane up with the center strip, the open sky stretching out endlessly in front of them. It was just another day for Keanu Reeves, flying under the radar, doing what he loved, and helping a stranger along the way. But for the man sitting next to him, this flight was about to be the most important journey of his life. Little did either of them know, the conversation they were about to have high above the clouds would change everything. The engine roared to life, filling the small cockpit with a steady, vibrating hum that seemed to shake away the troubles of the world below. As the plane accelerated down the runway, the scenery outside blurred into a rush of gray asphalt and green grass. The stranger sitting in the co-pilot's seat gripped the armrests tightly, his knuckles turning white. He was used to flying in large, stable airliners where turbulence felt like a gentle bump, but this small aircraft felt different. It was lighter, more sensitive to the wind. He watched Keanu's hands on the controls, noticing how steady and confident they were. Keanu didn't seem to mind the bumps at all, he was completely focused, his eyes scanning the instruments in front of him with a calm intensity. With a gentle pull back on the yoke, the plane lifted off the ground. The noise of the wheels hitting the pavement stopped, and suddenly, they were airborne. The ground dropped away, and the small terminal where the man had been panicking just minutes ago shrank into a tiny dot. As they climbed higher, the rough air smoothed out, and the plane broke through a layer of low-hanging clouds. Suddenly, bright sunlight flooded the cockpit, turning the gray world below into a blanket of brilliant white. The man exhaled a breath he felt like he had been holding for days. He loosened his grip on the armrest and looked out the window. "It's beautiful up here," the man said, his voice sounding a little shaky through the headset microphone. "It really is," Keanu replied, his voice coming through clearly and calmly. He adjusted a dial on the dashboard and leveled off the wings. "It's a different world once you get above the weather. All the noise is down there." For the first few minutes, they flew in a comfortable silence. The man looked over at the pilot. He still didn't recognize him. With the baseball cap and the headset on, and the context of being in a small plane, the man just assumed Keanu was a professional pilot or perhaps someone who flew as a hobby. He certainly didn't look like a celebrity. He looked like a regular guy who enjoyed his solitude. There was something incredibly grounding about being next to someone who had just saved his day without asking for anything in return. "I still can't believe you did this," the man said, shaking his head. "I was ready to give up. I was sitting on my suitcase, thinking I was going to miss the most important day of my daughter's life." Keanu glanced over briefly and smiled. "I'm glad I could help. I know how important family is. You have to be there." The man leaned back in his seat, trying to relax. He looked out at the endless sea of clouds stretching to the horizon. The anxiety of the morning was fading, replaced by a new kind of nervousness, the kind that comes with knowing you have to face a big life event. He realized he had hours of flight time ahead of him, and for some reason, he felt the urge to talk to this stranger. Maybe it was because Keanu was a pilot, a traditionally trustworthy figure. Or maybe it was because Keanu was a complete stranger who he would probably never see again after they landed. That made it safe. "You know," the man started, his voice quieter now, "I've been working my whole life for moments like this weekend. To be able to give my daughter the wedding she deserves. But honestly, I feel like I've been doing it all wrong." He paused, expecting Keanu to maybe ask a polite question or just nod. Instead, Keanu kept his eyes on the sky but turned his ear slightly, a silent signal that he was listening intently. "I run a company," the man continued. "Or at least, I used to. I spend every day on the phone, making deals, worrying about stocks, worrying about competitors. I thought if I made enough money, everything else would just fall into place. My wife, well, she passed away a few years ago. Since then, it's just been me and my daughter. And I tried to compensate by buying her things. I paid for the best schools, the best dresses, the best cars. He let out a dry, humorless laugh. I thought I was being a good father because I was providing for her. But looking back, I was barely there. Keanu didn't interrupt. He reached out and adjusted the throttle, keeping the speed steady. He knew about loss. He knew about the feeling of wanting to fix things for people you love. He waited for the man to continue. Now she's getting married, the man said, his voice cracking slightly. She's starting her own life. And when I look at her, I don't see a little girl who cares about the expensive shoes I bought her. I see a woman who is kind and strong, and I know she didn't get that from the money I spent. She got that from her mother. I feel like a stranger to her sometimes. I'm terrified that when I walk her down that aisle, she won't see a dad. She'll just see the guy who was never home. The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. The drone of the engine seemed to amplify the honesty in the cockpit. The man looked out the window, feeling a bit embarrassed for dumping all this on a pilot he had just met. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "I don't know why I'm telling you all this. You probably think I'm just some rich guy with rich people problems." Keanu shook his head slowly. "I don't think that," he said softly. "Love and family, they aren't about money. You can't buy time, and you can't buy presents. But the fact that you realize this that matters." He looked over at the man, his eyes hidden behind sunglasses but his expression serious. "You are flying halfway across the country in a small plane just to be there for her. That's not nothing. That's huge. Sometimes, just showing up is the most important thing you can do. She asked you to walk her down the aisle. That means she wants you there. Not your money. You." The stranger looked at Keanu, really looking at him for the first time. He saw a man who wasn't judging him, a man who wasn't looking at his watch or checking his phone. He saw a man who was genuinely interested in his well-being. It felt strange, in a world where everyone usually wanted something from him, to be sitting next to someone who wanted nothing. "Do you have kids?" the man asked Keanu. Keanu hesitated for a fraction of a second. "No," he said simply. "But I have people I love. And I know that life is short. It goes by faster than you think. You're doing the right thing by being there now. Don't beat yourself up for the past. You can't change that. You can only change right now." He gestured out the window at the passing landscape below. "Up here, you have a different perspective. When you're on the ground, you're stuck in the traffic, in the details, in the noise. But from up here, you see the big picture. You see how small everything is. Your mistakes, your worries, they're down there. Here, it's just the journey. Focus on the journey with her. The walk down the aisle is just a moment. The relationship you build with her from now on, that's the flight." The man took a deep breath. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of clarity. He had been so focused on the performance of being a good father, paying for the wedding, looking successful, that he forgot about the connection. This pilot, this humble man in a leather jacket, had just summed up his entire emotional struggle in a few sentences. "Thank you," the man said, his voice stronger now. "I really needed to hear that. I think I've been so afraid of messing up that I forgot to just be her dad." "There's still time," Keanu said, a warmth in his voice. "You're on your way. You're going to get there. And when you see her, just tell her the truth. Tell her you love her and you're proud. That's all she needs to hear." The rest of the flight passed in a much lighter mood. The man wasn't gripping the armrests anymore. He watched the clouds drift by, feeling the weight of his anxiety melting away with every mile. He asked Keanu about flying, curious about how he learned to handle such a complex machine. Keanu talked about the discipline it required, the need to stay calm under pressure, and the joy of freedom. He didn't mention anything about movies or Hollywood. He talked about the mechanics of the engine, the way the wind currents worked, and the beauty of seeing the sun rise from 30,000 feet. To the stranger, Keanu was just a fascinating, wise soul who happened to know how to fly. He admired the way Keanu handled the plane with such respect and care. It made him realize that maybe he needed to approach his life with that same kind of focus and respect, instead of just rushing through it. As they continued eastward, the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the clouds. The cockpit glowed with a warm, golden light. The man looked at his phone and saw a message from his daughter, "Can't wait to see you, Dad." He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. A few hours ago, that message would have made him feel guilty. Now, thanks to a conversation with a stranger in a small plane, it just made him happy. He put the phone away and looked out at the horizon, ready for the landing, ready to see his daughter, and ready to be the father he always wanted to be. He still didn't know the name of the man sitting next to him, but he felt like he had known him for a lifetime. The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long, golden shadows across the vast patchwork of the Midwest. Below them, the world looked like a giant quilt of green and brown fields, stitched together by narrow roads and tiny rivers that sparkled like silver threads in the fading light. Inside the cockpit, the air was cool and calm, a stark contrast to the heated panic the man had felt just hours earlier on the ground. He watched the horizon, mesmerized by the sheer size of the sky. It was strange how being this high up made problems on the ground seem smaller, almost insignificant. The noise of the engine became a comforting background hum, a steady heartbeat that kept time with their journey. He turned his attention back to Keanu. The pilot was flying the plane with an effortless grace. His hands rested lightly on the controls, making small, precise adjustments. The man noticed Keanu's hands then rough, calloused, and strong. These weren't the soft hands of someone who spent their life in meetings or behind a desk. They were the hands of a worker, someone who used tools and fixed things, someone who understood the value of effort. "You have good hands," the man said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "You look like you've been doing this for a long time, but you also look like someone who isn't afraid of hard work. How did a guy like you end up flying alone across the country?" Keanu glanced at the man, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. He adjusted the throttle slightly, keeping the speed steady. "I've always loved machines," Keanu began, his voice low and steady, almost matching the hum of the engine. "I love the way they work, the logic behind them. Everything has a purpose. And I love the freedom. When I'm up here, nobody needs anything from me. There are no phones ringing, no emails to answer. It's just me, the plane, and the sky. It's the one place where I can just breathe." "It sounds peaceful," the man replied, leaning his head back against the seat. "I wish I had that. My life feels like a storm that never stops. It's just noise from the moment I wake up until I close my eyes at night. But honestly, the hardest part isn't the noise. It's the silence that comes when you lose someone." The atmosphere in the small cabin shifted instantly. The man's voice grew quieter, tinged with a raw sadness that hadn't been there before. He looked down at his own hands, clasping them together tightly. "I lost my wife 3 years ago," he confessed, his voice trembling just a little. "We were married for 30 years. She was my best friend, my rock. When she got sick, I watched her fade away, day by day. And there was nothing I could do about it. No amount of money, no doctors could stop it. Keanu listened silently. He didn't try to offer empty platitudes or look away. He kept his eyes on the horizon, but his posture was one of complete attention. He knew this road. He knew the pain of that specific kind of helplessness. He let the silence hang there for a moment, giving the man space to speak. After she passed, the man continued, I felt like I was just existing, not living. I buried myself in work, trying to run away from the empty house. But then my daughter got engaged. And I realized. I'm still so angry. I'm angry at the world for taking her. I'm angry that she won't be at the wedding to see her baby girl in a white dress. How do I walk her down the aisle with that anger in my heart? How do I keep going when the world feels so heavy, like it's literally crushing my chest? He looked over at Keanu, searching for an answer. You seem like you have a good soul. You seem at peace. Have you ever felt that weight like you're carrying a stone that you can't put down? Keanu didn't answer right away. He took a deep breath, the kind of breath that reaches the bottom of your lungs. He turned slightly in his seat so he could look the man in the eye. The golden light of the sunset reflected in his sunglasses, hiding his eyes, but the sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. He wasn't speaking as a celebrity reading a script. He was speaking from the heart. Yes, Keanu said softly. I know that weight. I know what it's like to lose people you love more than anything. I know what it feels like to think the sun is never going to shine again. The man was surprised. He hadn't expected such a raw answer from a stranger. How do you do it? He asked. How do you not let it destroy you? Keanu paused, choosing his words carefully. You don't try to fight the weight, Keanu said. Grief, it's like the ocean. Sometimes it's calm, and sometimes a wave hits you so hard you feel like you're going to drown. You can't stop the waves. You have to let them wash over you. You have to feel the pain. If you try to push it down or ignore it, it just stays there, rotting inside you. He tapped the dashboard of the plane lightly. But you have to remember that the waves eventually recede. They always do. And when the water goes back out, you're still standing on the beach. You're still here. And that matters. The man wiped a tear from the corner of his eye, captivated by the analogy. It made sense to him in a way that therapy never had. But it's hard to remember that when you're underwater, he whispered. It is, Keanu agreed. That's why you can't look only at yourself. When you're hurting, the best thing you can do is help someone else. Even if it's just a small thing. Today, helping you get to that wedding, that helped me. It gave me a purpose for today. It takes you out of your own head and reminds you that you're part of something bigger. We're all just flying through the storm together, trying to help each other navigate. He looked back at the controls, scanning the instruments to ensure they were still on course. Your daughter needs you, Keanu added, his voice firm but kind. Your wife isn't gone because she's not in that seat. She's in your daughter. She's in the way your daughter smiles, the way she laughs. When you walk your daughter down the aisle, you're taking your wife with you. You're carrying the love you shared, not just the loss. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore, it was sacred. The man sat with those words, letting them sink in. For 3 years, he had been focusing on the absence, the empty space where his wife used to be. He hadn't thought about it that way, that loving his daughter was an extension of loving his wife. That the grief was the price of love, but that the love was still there, alive and breathing. Gratitude, Keanu added after a while, almost to himself. That's the other thing. When you feel like you can't go on, find one thing to be grateful for. Just one. The sun coming up. The smell of coffee. A stranger offering you a ride. You build on that. One brick at a time. It sounds simple, but it's the only way to build a house again after a storm. The man looked out the window. The sun had dipped below the horizon now, leaving behind a streak of brilliant purple and deep orange that slowly faded into the coming night. It was the most beautiful thing he had seen in a long time. "Thank you," he said, his voice full of emotion. "I came here thinking you were just giving me a ride. I think you might have just saved my life in a different way." Keanu shook his head, humbly brushing off the praise. "We're just two guys in a plane, talking about life. You already had the strength inside you. You just needed to remember where you put it." As the darkness began to envelop the plane, the only lights now were the soft glow of the instrument panel and the blinking beacon on the wing. Inside the cockpit, however, there was a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature. A bond had formed between the two men, a bond forged not by status or money, but by the shared experience of being human. The man no longer saw just a pilot. He saw a wise friend. And Keanu, ever the humble soul, was just grateful to have been able to help a fellow traveler find a little bit of light in the dark. The darkness outside the windows had turned into a deep, velvety black, but below them, the world was coming alive with light. They had crossed the vastness of the country, and now, the eastern horizon was glowing with the orange and white haze of millions of streetlights and buildings. It was the glow of New York City and its surrounding areas. Even from miles away, the energy of the city was visible. For the man sitting in the co-pilot seat, seeing those lights felt like finishing a marathon. His heart began to beat a little faster, not from fear, but from the anticipation of seeing his daughter. Keanu adjusted the radio dial, tuning into the air traffic control frequency for the New York area. The speaker crackled to life with a flurry of voices, pilots talking, controllers giving instructions, a chaotic symphony of organized noise. The man watched, impressed, as Keanu seamlessly integrated into this busy world. New York approach, this is November Alpha 123, 10 miles out, requesting landing instructions, Keanu said into his microphone. His voice was steady, authoritative yet calm. November Alpha 123, you are cleared for visual approach to runway 24 right, the controller replied. The man looked at Keanu with wide eyes. Visual approach, in this traffic, he asked. Keanu nodded, his eyes scanning the windscreen. It's clear enough. I like to see the runway. It feels more real. He began to descend the plane gently. The nose dipped down, and the feeling of weight in their stomachs returned. As they got closer to the ground, the details of the city sharpened. Cars looked like moving grains of rice, skyscrapers looked like toy blocks. It was breathtaking. Get ready, Keanu said softly. Here comes the bumps. As they entered the layer of air above the city, the plane shuddered a bit. The wind from the coast tossed them gently, but Keanu's hands were firm on the controls. He corrected the movement with small, smooth adjustments. The man gripped the handle of the door, holding his breath. The runway lights appeared in the distance, 2 rows of bright white lights stretching into the darkness. Keanu lined the plane up perfectly. The ground rushed up to meet them. Just when it seemed like they were going to hit the pavement too hard, the plane flared up slightly, the tail dropped, and the wheels touched the ground with a soft chirp. They were down. The man let out a long exhale he didn't know he was holding. They rolled down the runway, the speed decreasing until Keanu applied the brakes and turned off the main runway onto a taxiway. "Nice landing," the man said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "I've landed in commercial jets 100 times, but that felt different. More real." "Thanks," Keanu replied simply. "It's all about feeling the air." They taxied to a smaller private terminal, away from the big commercial gates. The engine RPM wound down, and the propeller slowed to a stop. The silence that returned to the cockpit was sudden and heavy. It was over. The journey was done. Keanu flicked a series of switches, turning off the electrical systems and the lights. The dashboard went dark. For a moment, they just sat there in the quiet of the night, the smell of avgas lingering in the air. Keanu opened his door, and the cool night breeze rushed in, carrying the sounds of the distant city. He climbed out onto the wing and dropped down to the tarmac. The man followed, his legs feeling a little shaky after sitting for so long. He stretched his arms over his head, feeling the stiffness in his back. He looked at his watch. It was late, but not too late. He would make it to the hotel, sleep for a few hours, and then it would be the wedding day. He was going to make it. While Keanu was securing the plane and putting the cover over the cockpit, the man reached for his bag. He pulled out his wallet. He felt a surge of gratitude so strong it made his throat tight. This stranger had saved him. He had listened to him, comforted him, and flown him across the country safely. He couldn't let this go without paying for it. He pulled out a thick stack of $100 bills. It was a lot of money, more than a first-class ticket, but this was worth so much more to him. As Keanu walked back from the tail of the plane, taking off his headset and gloves, the man approached him. "Please," the man said, holding out the money. "Take this. Seriously. I can't let you do this for free. The fuel, the wear and tear on the plane, your time, please. It's the least I can do." Keanu stopped and looked at the money. He didn't take it. He looked at the man and shook his head slowly. "I told you back in California," Keanu said gently. "You don't owe me anything." "Keanu, please," the man insisted, pushing the money forward. "You don't understand. You saved my weekend. You saved my relationship with my daughter. I insist." Keanu reached out and gently pushed the man's hand back down. He looked him in the eye with a warm, sincere expression. "You are going to walk your daughter down the aisle tomorrow. That is your payment. Seeing you happy and ready to be a father to her, that's all I wanted. Keep your money. Buy her something nice, or save it for a rainy day. I don't need it." The man stood there, stunned. He wasn't used to this. In his world, everything was a transaction. Everyone had a price. But this pilot, this rugged, humble man, wouldn't take a dime. The man slowly put his wallet away, feeling a sense of respect that he hadn't felt in a long time. "You are one of a kind," the man said. "I wish there was something I could do to repay you." "Just live your life well," Keanu said, picking up his own bag. "Love your family. That's how you repay people. By being kind." They walked side by side toward the small terminal building. The automatic glass doors slid open, and they stepped into the lobby. It was a sleek, modern space with marble floors and a few comfortable chairs. The contrast between the gritty, oil-smelling tarmac and the pristine lobby was sharp. Behind the reception desk, a young man who had been looking at a computer screen looked up. When he saw who walked in, His jaw dropped. He stood up so fast his chair fell backward. He scrambled around the desk, his eyes fixed on Keanu. "Oh my God!" the young attendant exclaimed, his voice echoing in the quiet terminal. "Mr. Reeves, is that actually you?" The man walking beside Keanu froze. He stopped mid-step. He looked at the excited attendant, then he looked at Keanu. "Mr. Reeves," he repeated, the name ringing a bell in his mind. "Wait. Keanu Reeves?" The man looked at the pilot he had spent the last 5 hours with. Really looked at him. The leather jacket, the dark hair, the rugged jawline, the humble posture. Suddenly, the features clicked into place. He wasn't just a pilot. He was the guy from the movies. He was the guy from The Matrix. He was the guy from John Wick. The man who had flown him across the country, listened to his life story, and comforted him about his dead wife, was one of the most famous and wealthy actors on the planet. You're him," the man stammered, pointing a shaking finger. "You're Keanu Reeves?" Keanu didn't try to hide it. He didn't run away. He just smiled that same modest smile and nodded. "Yeah, that's me. Sorry, I was just trying to keep a low profile today." The attendant was now standing in front of them, holding out a pen and a napkin, trembling with excitement. "Can I please get an autograph? I'm such a huge fan. I love your movies." Keanu took the pen. He didn't act annoyed or superior. He treated the attendant with total respect. "Sure, thanks for watching my movies." He signed the napkin and handed it back. "Have a good night." The man stood there, completely bewildered. His brain was trying to process the information. He had been pouring his heart out to a global superstar. He had offered to pay a billionaire money for gas. And Keanu had refused. Keanu had sat there and listened to his problems about money and loss, as if they were equals. I can't believe this," the man said, laughing in disbelief. "I spent the whole day thinking you were just a really nice pilot. I told you about my business, my wife. I didn't recognize you at all." Keanu laughed, a deep, genuine sound. "That's okay. I liked talking to you. It was better than being famous for a few hours." "You are incredible," the man said, shaking his head. "You could have charged me thousands. You could have ignored me at the airport. But you flew me yourself. And you gave me better advice than any therapist I've ever been to." Keanu slapped him lightly on the shoulder. "Hey, we are all just people, right? We all have the same worries. You're going to do great tomorrow. Go get some sleep." Keanu turned to head toward the exit where a car was likely waiting for him. The man watched him go. It was a moment that would stay with him forever. The world often judged people by their fame or their bank accounts, but today, he had met a man who had everything and yet acted like he had nothing to prove. As the glass doors slid shut behind the actor, the man stood in the middle of the quiet lobby, feeling lighter than he had in years. He didn't need a superhero to save him, he just needed a human being. And he had met the best one in the sky. The cool air of the New York night felt crisp against the father's face as he stepped out of the terminal and into the waiting taxi. The city was buzzing, horns honking in the distance and lights flashing everywhere, but inside the car, he felt a strange sense of quiet. He sank into the back seat, his mind still trying to process the last few hours. He looked out the window as the car merged onto the highway, watching the stream of red tail lights stretching out into the distance. Just a day ago, he would have been on his phone, checking stocks, yelling at assistants, or feeling a crushing weight in his chest. But now, his phone was in his pocket, turned off. He just sat there, breathing. He replayed the conversation in his mind. The humility of the pilot, the way he spoke about grief as if it were an old friend he had learned to live with. The father realized that he had spent years running from his pain, trying to buy his way out of it, when the only way out was through it. Keanu had shown him that just by being present. He thought about the moment in the lobby when the young attendant had recognized the actor. The father had been so blind. He had been sitting next to a legend, a man known all over the world, yet he had been treated like an equal. That was the rarest gift of all. In a world where everyone wanted something from you, Keanu Reeves had wanted nothing but to help a stranger get to a wedding. The taxi pulled up to the hotel. It was a grand, expensive building, the kind of place the father usually stayed in without even noticing the luxury. Tonight, however, he walked through the lobby with a new appreciation. He saw the families waiting for elevators, the tired doorman, the guests laughing in the bar. He realized that for a long time, he had been sleepwalking through his own life, too focused on the destination to see the people around him. He went up to his room, unpacked his suit, and for the first time in 3 years, he didn't need a sleeping pill to drift off. He slept deeply, dreaming of clouds and the sound of a steady engine. The morning of the wedding broke bright and clear. The father woke up with a sense of purpose. Instead of the usual anxiety about the schedule or the seating arrangements, he felt excitement. He put on his tuxedo, looking at himself in the mirror. The man staring back looked a little older, a little grayer, but his eyes looked different. They weren't tired and shadowed. They were clear. He thought about what Keanu had told him in the sky. Just show up. That is enough. He straightened his tie and smiled at his reflection. I'm here, he whispered to himself. I'm really here. The wedding was being held at a beautiful garden estate on the edge of the city. When he arrived, the place was already filling up with guests. He walked through the gates, and instead of heading straight to the VIP table to network with his business friends, he stopped to look at the flowers. He admired the white roses and the ribbons on the chairs. He watched the children running around on the grass. He took a moment to just breathe it all in. He saw his daughter standing near the entrance, greeting guests. She looked breathtaking in her dress, radiant with happiness. His heart swelled, but for the first time, it wasn't a painful swell of regret for his wife. It was just pure love. He walked over to her. When she saw him, her face lit up. "Dad!" she exclaimed, hugging him tight. "You made it? I was so worried when I heard about the cancelled flight." He held her close, inhaling the scent of her perfume, which reminded him so much of her mother. "I wouldn't have missed this for the world," he said, and he meant it. "I had a little help, but I'm here." The ceremony began. The music started, and the father felt a rush of emotion as he walked to the back of the aisle to meet her. He offered her his arm. She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "You look so handsome, Dad," she said. "Mom would have loved this." He squeezed her hand gently. "She is here," he said softly. "I can feel it." It wasn't just something he was saying to make her feel better. He actually believed it. He realized that his wife wasn't gone, she was in the way the sun hit the trees, in the smile of their daughter, in the love that filled the air. They began the walk down the aisle. Every eye was on them. In the past, the father would have been worried about his posture, or who was watching, or if his shoes were polished enough. But today, he didn't care about any of that. He focused entirely on the woman on his arm. He felt the rhythm of their steps, matching hers perfectly. He looked at the guests' friends, family, strangers, but he saw them as people, not as contacts. He smiled at them, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. He felt connected to them, part of this shared human experience. He remembered the pilot talking about the big picture from the sky, and he realized that this was his big picture. This walk, this moment, was the most important thing he would ever do. Later, at the reception, after the speeches and the toasts, the father found himself sitting at a quiet table with his daughter. The band was playing a soft waltz in the background, and the party was in full swing around them. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm so happy you're here, Dad," she said quietly. "You seem different. Lighter, somehow." The father nodded, looking out at the dance floor. "I had quite a journey to get here," he said. "Literally." "Tell me about it," she urged him. "I want to hear everything." So, he told her the story. He told her about the cancelled flight, the panic in the airport, and the stranger in the leather jacket. He told her about the small plane and the conversation they had about grief, love, and the ocean. He watched her face as he spoke, seeing her eyes widen with surprise. "And then," he said, pausing for effect, "when we landed, I found out who he really was." "Who?" his daughter asked, captivated. "Keanu Reeves," the father said. His daughter laughed, pulling back to look at him. "No way. You're joking." "The movie star." "I'm serious," the father said, chuckling himself. "I offered him thousands of dollars. I offered to pay for the fuel. He wouldn't take a cent. He just said to love you and be present. He treated me like a friend, not a fan." The father looked at his daughter, his eyes misty. "He is a famous man, but in that plane, he was just a human being. He taught me that no matter who you are, or what you have, the most valuable thing you can give is your time and your kindness. He didn't have to help me. He could have ignored me and flown away. But he chose to stop. He chose to listen." The impact of the story settled between them. It wasn't about the celebrity name drop. It was about the lesson. "I want to be like that," the father continued. "I want to be the kind of man who helps people just because he can. I've spent so long worrying about my legacy, about my business. But looking back, the only thing that will matter is how I treated people. How I loved you." The father looked up at the ceiling of the tent, imagining the sky above it. Somewhere out there, Keanu Reeves was probably flying again, or maybe just walking down a street, incognito and humble. He would probably never know how much that one flight meant to one stranger. Weeks later, the father was back in his office, but things had changed. He had sold his private jet. He didn't need it anymore. He spent more time at home. He started a foundation to help grieving parents, something his wife would have loved. And whenever he saw a movie with a certain actor, he would smile, remembering the sound of the engine and the feeling of the sun coming through the clouds. The story of that day became a legend in his family, not because of the famous actor, but because of the kindness. It proved that you don't need a superhero to save you. Sometimes, you just need a pilot who is willing to fly you home. And sometimes, the person with the most to give is the one who asks for nothing in return. As the father looked at a framed photo of his daughter on her wedding day, he whispered a silent thank you to the sky. The conversation changed everything, indeed. It turned a life of resentment into a life of gratitude, and for that, he would be forever grateful to the quiet man in the cockpit.